All right, so let's talk about argument. And you might think I'm really good at argument. I don't need to learn any more about it. This is actually a different form of argument than what you're probably used to with friends or family members and all of that. So this is more about how to produce an academic argument effectively, which actually in turn will help you with any like arguments that you get to in personal relationships and all of that. So let's take a look at all the different pieces of argument. So I have this quote here from George Orwell. It says, if you cannot write well, you cannot think well. And if you cannot think well, others will do your thinking for you. So just think about how significant that is, about how important it is to be able to think on your own, form your own opinions, and communicate those opinions effectively. So it is, you probably, depending on the topic, it is something that is probably very important to you. And it's probably an essential facet of life to be able to do this. So what we talk about in this presentation, it's not just for this particular paper. It's stuff that can help you in many, many areas in your life. So why do we do this? What's the point? This is not the only argumentative or persuasive paper you will have to do. You will have them probably through many different courses in your academic career. And these are different reasons for them. It helps you learn how to develop and defend a position. It also helps you kind of examine your own ideas and others' ideas. It helps you learn how to convince other people of your ideas and like the validity of them. It also helps you learn how to resolve conflicting points of view and just learn how to kind of navigate that. So if an instructor assigns this kind of paper, these are all the different types of terms that they could use to allude to argument. Sometimes they might just want a statement, so it might not be a full essay, but these are all terms that are kind of synonymous with argument or persuasion. So what is an academic argument? So like I said earlier, this is going to be different than, maybe an argument you got into with, a friend the other day. So this is an academic argument. But the principles can still, be useful in your normal arguments with people you know. So an academic argument, it takes a stand, it presents evidence, it uses logic to kind of help the audience accept or at least consider the position you're giving or the writer's giving. This isn't 100%. They'll always accept the things that you say. They won't always be convinced, but this is a way to learn how to do that effectively. Also, writers try to be fair and respectful to others, especially those with opposing viewpoints. So that is a big thing, especially as we are in a political season where you might see things that aren't super respectful of others. In true argument, you're sticking to the topics at hand, and you're not, kind of getting swayed by, he's this or that, or she's this or that kind of thing. So this is where you are fair and respectful in the thing that you are attacking, or that you are opposing are the topics itself. And you're not, blasting other people who have a different opinion, because that is a big way to get people to not listen to you if you are deemed as being rude or disrespectful. So what is argument not? I've already kind of alluded to this. It's not a quarrel. It's also not where you spin the facts, which is like propaganda. And you're also not just denying or contradicting someone else's opinion. You actually have to present your own opinion. And you also have to have reasons and evidence to back up what your opinion is. So arguments need to be debatable. They need to have debatable statements in them. And that is having a debatable statement is the only thing that you can have as a basis for argument. So basically, there needs to be conflicting opinions or facts that call the validity of the statement into question. Now, these kinds of arguments, these aren't debatable. So these are the ones that you'll want to avoid. So if it's something that has to do with personal preference, then those aren't good for arguments. So if someone says, or if you say, you don't like the taste of diet soda, no one, not me, not your best friend, not whoever, can't legitimately argue that you are right. Now, if you are being dishonest, then that's a whole other issue. But that's this just at the very core of you don't like XYZ. Someone cannot argue that, no, this is debatable. I think you do like it, kind of thing. Also, statements of fact, those cannot be argued. Facts are verified. They are verifiable, and so they can't be debatable. So if there's no point in arguing if your school has instructors' lectures available online, because that's something someone can just go online to verify themselves. So those are examples of things that cannot be debatable. You also likely partake in these kind of really solid academic types of arguments in real life, in blogs, work-related proposals, letters to the editor, business letters, etc. All those places you have to formulate an argument to influence your readers. Also, arguments are central to our democracy. So it's a way that helps all of us participate on a national or even on a global level about conversation, about ideas, and help us partake in conversations about things that matter. Also, as you start to understand these different, like the methods of argumentation better, the better you will be able to like recognize and analyze and respond to arguments that you hear. And by mastering these techniques yourself as, as an author, as a rhetorician, all that kind of stuff, you'll be better able to be a clearer thinker. You'll be a more informed citizen, and which in turn helps you better influence people around you. So let's, you probably remember this little guy, right? The rhetorical triangle. And the different pieces of that, the logos, that's where you're focusing on the text. Pathos, that's where you're focusing on the audience and like emotions and stuff that you're wanting to evoke. And, oh, I have a typo. That other one should be ethos, authority. And that focuses on the writer. So let's look at this example of logos. So you have this, the Toyota Prius. It's an ad for it. So just take a second and look at the different pieces of that. So let's go through the first question. Does the argument have a clear thesis? In other words, can you identify the main point the writer's trying to make? So the main point is how this car, it's newly redesigned, and it has, it's so good. It has a love affair between the, environment and it, so that shows, how friendly it is basically to the environment. The next, does the argument include the facts, examples, or expert opinions that help support it? So if over here on the bottom, it does say it's newly redesigned, so it gives you the year that supports that, but also it shows specifically what kind of gas mileage it gets. And can you find any errors in logic or fallacies that undermine the argument's reasoning? I don't see any in this. I guess you could go through and research what kind of environmental impact the plant that produces these cars has. So if it has a negative impact, then that could kind of negate the argument here. So an important thing to note with logos. So Aristotle thought people are very logical, and they will respond well to a well-constructed argument. So you need to have a logical format and deductive and inductive reasoning to help reach these conclusions. Next, we have pathos. And with this, Aristotle knew that emotions were very persuasive to people. It helps add a human dimension. That's why I have the puppy there, because everyone loves puppies. So here is an example of pathos in action. So take a second and look at that image. So the first question, does the argument include words or images designed to move the readers? Well, yeah, you've got these beautiful, pristine, very scary and large polar bears in Inupiaq. They are called Nanuks. And they are, on this huge sea of white snow. That's all you can see, right? And then you've got all this graffiti on these animals. So, that kind of, all those different things. And then on the bottom where it says, what will it take before we respect the planet? So all of those pieces together are pretty impactful. You can also notice how the words on the bottom, while they are easy to see, they aren't the first thing you look at is the animals, right? So that image is what takes center stage. Does the argument use emotionally loaded language? I would say the word respect would be like a key word, definitely, in that. The next bullet point, does the argument include vivid descriptions or striking examples calculated to appeal to emotions? So the point of this is about, it's from the WWF.org. I think that's World Wildlife Foundation. So their goal is to support and protect wildlife, correct? And the goal of this is to remind people of the kinds of things that can happen. And, does it need to come to this before people start paying attention? So it uses all of these different pieces together, especially the argument with these bears being, spray painted on to help, get to your emotions. So your emotions could differ in this. It could be, anger or sadness, frustration, anything in there. Are the values or beliefs of the writer clear in the argument? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that they are for protecting the animals and the environment. I don't think there's any kind of gray area in there. And lastly, does the tone seem emotional? In my opinion, the emotion is kind of like a pleading kind of feeling. But, that also can just kind of differ from person to person. You might feel more of like a sadness or an anger or frustration, that kind of thing. So I think that kind of, while the emotions are similar, they can also kind of vary slightly like that. Next, ethos. Aristotle knew that the character of a person could contribute to the persuasiveness of an argument. So if that person is known to be honorable or truthful or knowledgeable, or trustworthy, all of that, that will help support the argument and help people accept what is being said. So in this image, take a second and look at it. So ethos in action, let's look at those questions. It says, does the person making the argument demonstrate knowledge of the subject? So the argument is being made by Nike. So, and they are demonstrating knowledge of making good sportswear and activewear because look, Serena, hotshot tennis player, she's been playing for, oh my gosh, I don't know, at least 20 years, right? Something like that. And won however many tennis championships. I don't know much about tennis, sorry. But she is very famous, very good, all of that. So, you know, they're like, well, we know sportswear so much, even Serena wears us. Like, that's how good we are. So that's what Nike is saying there. Next, what steps does the person making the argument take to present its position as reasonable? Well, I mean, it actually shows her physically in a tennis match. So we don't just have to tell you Serena wears this or Serena wears it while she's actually playing. Here, we'll show you a picture of it. Does the argument seem fair? Yes, I think so. There's not anything in there that is unfair. If the argument includes sources, do they seem both reliable and credible? Does it include documentation? There's no documentation in that. There might be like a little disclaimer in the real ad or something, or like copyright or whatever. But the sources could be also her wearing it, also with people knowing that her stance and who she is and what kind of athlete she is. And that's also common knowledge, so that's not necessarily something that would need to be cited. And lastly, does the person making the argument demonstrate respect for opposing views? Yes. If Nike made an ad that was disrespectful or bashing another company, then that would be terrible for their company. It would be terrible for Nike because it would be seen as very tacky and disrespectful. So if they were like, look, Serena's wearing us because Adidas sucks, and so does Reebok, you know, something like that, then that would not be cool. So that kind of thing, typically you would not see that happen. So the elements that go into your argument, so these are kind of like the ingredients for the recipe. There are 4 of them. And so just think of it kind of like an ancient Greek temple where you've got the 4 pillars and all of that. And each of these things on the right, the thesis statement, evidence, refutation of opposing arguments, conclusion, each of those go together to support the argument. So thesis statement, we have talked about them before, you've written them before, but it's also very important, an important piece of argument. It's a single sentence. Sometimes you put it in 2 sentences, right? That states your position. It has to be argumentative and debatable. It needs to be very firm. It needs to take a firm stand. And if you aren't sure if it is a good thesis statement or if it's debatable, then try to form the opposing argument, which is called the antithesis, to help make sure it's debatable. And I'll give you an example. So I've got 2 examples of theses. So the first one, colleges should require all students to study a foreign language. It's debatable, right? Because it's a person's opinion and it's something that can be debated. Also, colleges should require all liberal arts majors to study a foreign language. But if we want to check them to make sure that they are debatable, we could do the opposite of them, the antithesis, which is on the bottom. And for example, the first one, it says colleges should not require all students to study a foreign language. It's the opposite, so that shows you that the actual thesis statement is debatable. Also, colleges should not require all liberal arts majors to study a foreign language. Also, that shows that the original thesis statement was debatable, so that one is an okay one to use as well. Okay, evidence, that is the second pillar. As you know, evidence includes facts, observations, expert opinions, examples, statistics, all that kind of stuff that support your thesis. In argument, you use both facts and opinions to support your argument. Now, it's important to note the difference in the two. I'm sure by definition, you know, facts and opinions are different, but oftentimes in our culture and in our society, they can kind of be merged together and people think that facts are opinions and opinions are facts. So a fact is a statement that can be verified. Opinion, always open debate. And it's just a personal judgment on something. So facts, thumbs up. Facts are good. So these are some examples. Some community colleges have no foreign language requirements. These go with that thesis statement I gave you a minute ago. So that is a fact. Another one is at some universities, undergrads must take as many as 14 language credits, foreign language credits. That's another fact. It's not debatable. It's just a fact. What it is, what it is. The next one, some schools grant credit for high school language classes, allowing these courses to fulfill the college foreign language requirement. Another fact. Those are good to use in arguments. And those would be good to back up the thesis statement we talked about earlier. Unsupported opinions, thumbs down. Foreign language courses are not as important as math and science courses. Cool. Sorry you feel that way. You know, that's just a feeling, right? The next one, foreign language study should be a top priority on university campuses. And the next one, it is not fair to force all students to study a foreign language. So these are all opinions. They have no support to them. And you could find some kind of evidence, et cetera, to back it up. But that is what is missing here. So that is not good to do or have on its own. So supported opinions, these are the kinds you want. So the first example, the university requires all students to take a full year of foreign language study, but it is not doing enough to support those who need help. For example, it does not provide enough student tutors and the language labs have no evening hours. So you have the person's opinion presented, then you have evidence to back it up. The next one, according to Ruth Fuentes, chair of the Spanish department, nursing and criminal justice majors who take at least 2 years of Spanish have an easier time finding employment after graduation than students in other majors who do not study Spanish. That's another piece of evidence to back that up, to back up the opinion. The next pillar, the third pillar, refutation, which might sound like, well, I don't know what that is. That's a big word. Okay, it's basically when you refute something or contradict it. So every argument has more than one side. In addition to providing your evidence for your position, you also need to refute or disprove or call into question arguments that will challenge your position. So you have to think about those too, because there will always be naysayers or someone who doesn't agree with you. So for example, if you take a position in favor of requiring a foreign language at school, like those theses we were looking at earlier, Some readers might argue that college students already have to take too many required courses. So why are you requiring this? Someone might think that way. What you could do with that is, because you have to think about it ahead of time, you could acknowledge the validity of the argument, then refute it by pointing out that required foreign language courses could replace another less important, quote, course. But I say they are all important. Lastly, the fourth pillar, the concluding statement. So after you have given the convincing support for your position and you refuted your opposing arguments, then you end with a strong concluding statement. So you don't want to end with your refutation, because then you'll end with what the opposing side is saying. So you don't want the last thing that your reader reads is to be, the opposing view. You don't want that to be their last impression. You want it to be your strong reminder. These are the things that I said, and these are my points that I made. So you want your words to be last. So for example, you may conclude an essay in support of a foreign language requirement by making a specific recommendation or by predicting the possible negative outcome of not implementing this requirement. So this is a checklist for you guys for an argument of paper. So go through these and just make sure if you can check mark each of these things off the list, then that tells you that you have all the pieces that you need for your argumentative paper.